All right. Is everybody back? Did you all find the restrooms? They're over in this hallway. You can go now if you can hold it. So it's 10:47, and Pochi's up. Remember, make some noise.
Yeah, Pochi.
Thank you. So I'm Pochi. I'm from Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, and I'm gonna show you some things about this game we are doing. It's A Day in the Botanical Garden. It's actually in Portuguese. I translated. We have a project it's in the psychology department, and we study cognition, health, education, and technology. And we do all that through qualitative research, and mostly we do workshops using digital technology, and mostly with children and teenagers. And on this project specifically that I'm presenting now, we are trying to understand a bit more about how people learn with games. And
sorry, keep talking.
That's both learning the game itself as a complex system and learning content through the game. We are trying to know more about both things. And for that, we are designing a game for the botanical garden in our city. And this is a physical prototype we did with a map. And I'm showing this just to say it was very important for us to do this, to be able to understand how people would go to different places and try to design the game. The thing is, we are not game designers, and we didn't have any programmers in our group when we started. We now have. So it's a very simple game, and we don't think we can teach much right now, but we are using it through a cycle of design and testing to learn more about how people are learning with the game. And in this cycle, we do workshops and play with the children. The game is being used with children from 8 years old to 14. So we are trying to do a new version of the game. It's going to be launched in a couple of months, in July. We are just getting the last things done. But the thing is, we can put some things from our theories about cognition in the game and then test them and see how people are learning or not. And it's been a lot of data to know more about these theories. The objective of the game is to get seeds and plant them in the right places in the botanical garden. So people have to just go to a place where there are all the seeds and get some other things like water to plants, and then know where the specific type of plants stay in the botanical garden and go to those places. Some of the results we have with the first tests, we are going to use this game a lot more for more workshops, so this is just something we are starting to get. And my dissertation was about doing the game, so we have a lot of other results on design, but the most important things is first that learning how to use the locative technology was very hard for the children. I don't know how it's here, but I think in Brazil having access to this technology is a lot harder and less common than here. So this is a big issue for us. And the first time we tried using the game, most children couldn't play it because it was too hard to understand how to use the map and find things. So we made a tutorial where you just start the game and there's one point you can go to, and the quest says you have to go there, and it's easy to find looking around. And then from that point, when you talk to a character, there's one more point to go, and then you do that until there are 3 or 4 things on the map, and then you start the game with the whole other things on the map. And this helped a lot with helping children find how they have to look at the map and everything. And it gives them time to learn how to use the tablets if they haven't used it yet. And the real world things are really important for catching the attention of the players, because sometimes if they didn't know where to go, they would just look around and say, wow, that's really interesting. They surely put something there. And they would run there and not look at the map. And they wouldn't look if there's something there, and wouldn't pay attention to the quests. Just because the place is interesting, there should be something there. And the designers probably thought about it, and we didn't. So we are now trying to think more about it. And we are going a lot more to the botanical garden and looking around and saying, okay, this point has to have something. We can put a hidden quest here, a trap, or something like that, so people can really explore more and not just go to the places we point out in the map. These are the most important things we found out. We are still trying to finish the game, and we are going to use it a lot more. But it's really simple, and we are planning on studying. We now are studying a lot more game design, and I'm here to learn a bit, so we can really make a good game to stay in the botanical garden, so children can learn more about botanic and everything there. And that's it. That's my email. If anyone wants to talk to me, thank you.
All right. Sean Dickers is up. Oh. Just to set you off. All right, some mood music as Sean sets up. Be scared. Hi. First of all, I want to say thanks to John for grabbing me, because the conversations have been wonderful in and out. And I'm really kind of impressed at how many people are here. So thanks to Dave and the ARIS crew and all those folks for making a great product and giving us time to talk today. So my name is Sean, and I work at Ohio University, formerly here working with John and Chris and these folks. And my goal over last year was we wanted to try to see if mobile games could engage people at an emotional level. I think one of the things we're looking at as we make these games right now is primarily the people that play these games are the same people that make them. And to some degree, playing each other's games is part of building this community and whatever. If it's ever going to be a mass media where we have millions of players versus thousands, the games have to be things that you go tell your friend about and that you connect with the games because you had a great experience. So instead of working on learning first and foremost, we worked on scaring the crap out of people. So I wanted to see if a device this big could create a sense of fear. So my grad students and I studied all sorts of horror movies and what exactly about those movies scare people and how designers of those movies create fearful elements. And the beautiful thing is they, when you start to talk to these people on the phone and whatnot, is that they fully understand that most movies get watched in a dark room. So they do little things like limit view and make it so you can't quite see as a viewer what's going on to create anxiety. So we started to try to build those elements. The problem is this will never limit my view. So if I really want to create horror, I have to try to find ways to do that. So what I want to share with you today is talk to you about a game called Horror on the Ridges. I'm going to tell you about the context, the setting. We're really lucky not everybody has an insane asylum in their neighborhood. We did, so we played off that. At the same time, I have other groups of students working on romance games, so I'm not trying to pick one genre over another, and hopefully Blockbuster's okay with that. So we created a game. First, let me show you Athens. It's a quaint little Appalachian town. They're famous for their bluegrass, their marijuana, and their Paw Festival. They see themselves as the South. They're one of the only counties in Ohio that voted to stay with the South during the Civil War, and they still feel that way. So it's a unique community, and they're also known for being one of the 10 most haunted places in America. So they have these kind of ghost train tunnels. They have angels that cry in the graveyards, and the graveyards are organized like a pentagram. So the whole town is one of these kinds of places. There's a great narrative and mythos in this town, so you can start to think about Athens as a community that kind of celebrates this culture. I took out the picture of the parties, but they have one of the bigger Halloween festivals here. They're #2 only to Madison, Wisconsin. So they're trying to compete with that, but roughly 20,000 people come to Athens just to celebrate Halloween. And one of the reasons for this is a place called the Ridges. So here's the university. Off in the corner, the university's bought out this complex called the Ridges. And it's actually on this hill that overlooks the entire town. So it's spooky as heck. In the 1930s, a young Bob Kane visited here and 2 or 3 other insane asylums and started to get ideas about villains for a Batman comic book kind of thing. So some of those villains were born out of this location. This location had a greenhouse where the inmates would raise their own kind of poisons and plants. They actually kept a pet crocodile. If you're a Batman fan, you get these references. They kept a pet crocodile down in their basement called Mr. Crocs, and I'll show you a picture of him later. But the whole asylum was born back in the era, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where they wanted to make these beautiful asylums out in nature that would be these kind of places where people could get air, because the theory was people went insane because they lived in cities. So if you could just get them out to the country, they could be sane. That didn't work, so they started cutting open brains and doing really weird things. This is prior to IRBs. So we didn't have to make up the disturbing stories. We just had to go to the Historical Society, who said, you really want to know about this stuff? So we did. We read journals, and we used those characters as part of the heroes and villains in the story. You're a visiting doctor in this mobile game. You get a tour around the Ridges. This is kind of the old picture. Those those turrets and towers have gone away now. This is a more current picture of it, and I'll bring you right up to today. So the Ridges still exist largely in the form that it was in back then. The doctors and nurses lived at the Ridges. The idea was, because it was so far out in the country, you had to get them out there. So these are real photos from the Ridges. You'd give them really nice facilities to attract these kind of top doctors, and then you'd let them do whatever they want to do to people, and in a place where nobody really knew what they were doing to people. And this was really disturbing, but it was also kind of how we advanced medicine in the 1910s, 1920s, right? So it's real history and what was going on there. The inmates would take care of the place. They grew their own food. Once a day they would get aired, quote unquote. They would air the prisoners. And they would eat in these kind of large masses and bundles. And then the rest of the time they would kind of sit around and do things. Over half the inmates were here because they masturbated, and their families caught them, and then they put them in an insane asylum. So not all of them were like severe mental disabilities, but they mixed them all together and they saw it the same way. So that's the people that were there. This is today's Ridges, and the beauty of this game is we could layer things in the game right over what players were seeing while they were doing it. But we still needed to figure out how to scare them, because all of this was like disturbing, but it wasn't scary. Our first efforts, we've done about 6 iterations on this game. First efforts were to try to kind of spook them like a Wes Craven kind of boo thing, but what we discovered is the Hitchcockian unraveling of the story was actually the more effective tool for what we did. So let me show you that a little bit. I'll get through some of these characters. Again, we didn't have to really invent new characters. They were all waiting for us.
About 2 minutes left.
I think I'm about at 2 minutes. That was a lobotomy, by the way. And again, they were studying medicine. This was legitimate medicine back then as to how to do it. That's Jim Crocs. That's the greenhouse. And then we still have these kind of disturbing areas today. These are real pictures from the location that we could get. That's a story about an inmate that died and her blood actually stained the floor and that sort of thing. So here's the Ridges. Here's how you scare people. This is what we found after about a year in new iterations, is that the way to scare people at the Ridges was to get them to limit their view. So this is a game that those of you that use ARIS are familiar with that kind of image and what it looks like. So the game's substantial. It takes about an hour to play through it. Here's what we found. I'll give you two ways to scare people. One way to scare people is to make them uncomfortable. So what people don't generally do is walk off the path. So John Martin's chapter about taking people off the path up in Maine with those kids was a large inspiration for how do we get people to walk off the path and go look in that window. And mobile games do that really well, because you can just put the dot there, limit the meter range, and off they go. When you start looking in windows, you notice the view starts to get limited, and what you see actually changes. So you can recreate what happens in movies by limiting views. Second thing that we could do to scare people is put people in uncomfortable spots. So this is really mean and devious, and I wouldn't do this with middle schoolers, of course. But if you make someone go behind that bush, then you actually have these great sensory inputs going on with people that actually become kind of terrifying. People don't like cobwebs, and they don't like branches, and they don't like those kinds of things. We're an anti-natural kind of world. So anytime we could bring people into those spaces, they would dare each other to do it. So when we play tested, we saw that anxiety started to come up in groups of players whenever we made them go into places they wouldn't normally want to go. And this is where the conversations would start between players. So we documented that players would dare each other to go look first, And that had to come with some sort of satisfying experience. Luckily, as we walked around the ridges, there's hundreds of different windows to look inside of, and we could point them at the ones that had the most disturbing images. When tied into a narrative or story, that would happen. So the eyes adjusting, especially if played during the day, creates the exact same limited view effect that we can see in a movie, where you can't see everything, and it creates the same kind of anxiety. And I hope for the mobile game designers in this room, this is just an interesting kind of interaction, and that's what I was going for in the last minute here. There's the cobwebs. If you get going, we can limit the view, we can start to do it, and then when you look inside, you can actually see things that become more and more disturbing, like actual writing on the wall. Now, we don't know if this is from college students or from inmates, but what we can do is put a narrative together where we're saying that that's one of the inmates. So it's when people's eyes adjust and actually can see the writing that when it's layered on top of a narrative, you're creating false expectations. So horror is rooted in this idea that people imagine what will happen, and that imagination prior to the event is actually what brings people in and engages them. So anytime you can set up a narrative or storyline where people can guess the outcome, then that outcome is usually worse than what you can do with special effects. Thus, Hitchcock often took the camera off the gory stuff so that your imagination could fill that gap. Right now, the media is kind of at that point. When we do mobile media, I think what we can do is create narratives where what actually happens doesn't have to be done in the technology. It can be done in the imagination. To do that, we as writers have to trust that the people playing our games are actually into our stories. And that takes kind of a level of trust that we don't normally put into things. So that's my 5 minutes. I hope I'm within my time. Okay, good? Good? All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Denise is next. And I can run the time thing if you want. Or you can run the time thing. All right, sure. We'll trust you, Denise. And then Eric.
So moving between slides is what, just arrows? Ooh, presenter notes. I love this. Okay. I'm muted? Okay. All right. I'm going to take over where Jennifer left off and just do a quick thank you to the community, because I wasn't here last year and I heard so many good things, and I was actually here 2 years ago presenting a poster about one of the ARIS games I'm going to tell you about quickly, and I just got so much good feedback and so much warmth and respect immediately from this community that it encouraged me so much, and now I'm back 2 years later talking about my dissertation research, which I made with an ARIS game, so thank you to ARIS. All right, now, in we go. So as I alluded to, I made 2 games, both under the guise of school scene investigator. So my games are inside school buildings using QR codes. The first one was the case of the stolen score sheets, which actually David had my peer-reviewed journal article up on his slide earlier today. This did become a journal article for me, this research that I did with this game. It was a similar framework to my dissertation, so I do want to touch on it briefly. But most of my presentation will focus on the case of the mystery powder, which was my dissertation game. Looks something like this. I actually embedded a science activity within the ARIS game. So a hands-on science activity was played while they were also doing the ARIS game. All right, so quickly the prologue. The case of the stolen score sheets was a research project for me, basically a pilot for my dissertation. Kids played in groups of 3 or 4, 4 kids shown on the right there. They used QR codes, scanned the QR codes that were mounted around their school building. I pulled them out of class to do this. I did one group at a time. I actually followed every group that played and took observational notes. And they actually used my phone and my friend's phone and my husband's phone, because the school didn't even have mobile devices. So the reason I had to do one group at a time was because that was all the phones I could collect. So then I scaled it up, and I wanted to see what would happen if a whole class played at once. So the school finally bought a cart of iPads, and voila, I could update my game and let a whole class play simultaneously and see what happened. And so what I was actually looking at was flow as a measure of engagement, and sure enough, even the kids who were pulled out of class and did the game voluntarily had the same exact level of flow as kids who had to do it as a mandatory classroom activity, which was pretty awesome going into my dissertation. So with my dissertation, I wanted to try and get at standards. Science ed is sort of my thing. I came from informal science education, having worked at a museum for over 6 years. And so I met with the school and I was like, all right, guys, so what is sort of a popular activity that the kids like that has sort of a mystery element that could be maybe made into a game? And we decided on what was called the mystery powder experiment. It looks something like this. This is business as usual. This is not my game version. So basically, kids are given a couple known powders, baking soda, sugar, I can't remember the last one, cornstarch. They do some tests, like a vinegar test, an iodine test. They take some notes, and then they're given a mystery powder, which is a combo of 2 of those known powders. And they have to run those tests again and figure out what the mystery powder is. So they do it collaboratively, which is important because my games are all collaborative. And so I took those ideas and I made them into the case of the mystery powder. Now I'm going to tell you the rest of my time. I'm going to talk about the case of the mystery powder, which is about 3 minutes. All right, pretty good. So to kind of keep the whole magic circle, keep the whole gamification thing going, I gave kids a confidential envelope. I gave them a badge that they were really a school scene investigator, which was convenient because as you see, I've got the start code here. My games actually have not only a collaborative component, but there's always multiple versions because when those kids were playing a full class at once, I didn't want them all finding out the thief at the same time and sort of cheating off each other. So there's actually 4 different versions, 4 different thieves. I mean, like, oh my gosh. So they need to have their start code, which kicks off what version they're playing. And it's tucked in behind their badge. And I don't show it here, but on the flip side of this badge, I also had kids write down their login to ARIS so that they were always carrying it with them on their badge in case they got bumped out of ARIS, whatnot. And that was also a cool thing because when a kid was absent, this game went over the course of a number of days, and if a kid was absent, we had their badge, we had their login, we could log them in, and one of their classmates could play that chapter for them. Inside that confidential envelope was my worksheet, which I called an incident report to try and make it cool, but it was hidden in a confidential envelope, so it was already kind of cool. But this is how I knew what they were learning. They had to write down their scientific practices aligned to standards, aligned to specifically next generation science standards, and everything was open-ended answers. They worked on it progressively throughout the game. Important to note also about my games is that they play roles. That's how it's collaborative. At the very beginning of the game, they have to discuss amongst themselves and decide which role each kid is going to take. You're sneaking up on me. That means my time's almost done. All right, I'm almost there. Okay, so there is a narrative, like a lot of us are dealing with narratives here. My narrative starts off with a crime scene. The case of the mystery powder is there was money stolen from the cash register at the cafeteria, and a mystery powder was left behind. So the known powders, baking soda, cornstarch, and sugar, are all associated with a suspect. On the left, Destiny, she's making a rocket using baking soda. The janitor, the real janitor from the school, by the way, is using cornstarch as a cleaning solution. And that is the real admin assistant who had made sugar cookies. So they each sort of had a reason to be associated with the known powders. This is what it looks like when kids are playing, right? They're scanning codes with the iPads, they're reading each other's iPads, they're sharing. I mean, that's like collaboration at its finest right there on the right. So they go around to the different rooms. They specifically get videos at these locations, so I wanted to call them out because that's how they're getting the information that the kids are getting in that control experiment. They're getting it through video information at each of these stops. When they go, they see videos with the cornstarch here, they see videos with the baking soda here. And then they just hang out in the hallways and fill out that incident report. I love this picture. I love that he's lying on the floor in the hallway during the middle of school, during the middle of class. This is just awesome. Disturb the inertia. Finally, they come back to the classroom. They've gotten all that great video information. They got all that great content from having played the game out in the hallways. They come back. They're given a mystery powder. And now, you can't quite see it even that, but there's a detective character in the game. He's the one who talks them through how to do the experiment, not the teacher. It's the detective. Keep them in the magic circle. So they do their experiment. They figure out what the mystery powder is. And I just have to tell you this one anecdote. I know I'm done. But the way I knew that I had actually labeled my mystery powders incorrectly was because the kids had played the game. They knew what that mystery powder was. They were so confident. They said, the game is wrong. I'm like, what do you mean the game is wrong? I had actually labeled the mystery powders wrong. But it was their conviction, them doing their, arguing with evidence with me, saying how wrong the game was, and sure enough, they were right. So There you go. Any questions?
Very good.
Oh, folks, shameless plug. I can present on Thursday, so if you want to all the research that goes with that, which is on Thursday, 10:30.
I'm glad that Mr. Powder wasn't anthrax. It would be a much different story. All right. Susan and Eric. Give it up.
All right, hi, I'm Eric. I'm 14. This is my mom. Recently, I did a merit badge with the Boy Scouts of America for game design, and we decided to use ARIS to do this. So there are 13 of us, and we met over a 6-week period with one long afternoon at the end to make the game. We went over the basics of game design in ARIS, and at the very end, we each made our own game. Now, the people's age ranged from 11 to 14, and it was in the fall of last year. Now, up on the screen is the merit badge sheet, which are just a few of the requirements to get the badge.
So many things they talked about.
These are just a few things we talked about, like intellectual property, thematic elements, gameplay elements, game analysis, and other related terms. Here's a picture of us actually doing it at the library.
So we used the resources at the public library one day over winter break. They had the laptops, they had the room, so almost all the boys were able to make it. We went in, we had 2 hours of ARIS training, and like you said, from the museum, they just pick it up. They're just good to go. So that was enough for them. And then they started their games right then. They had all the weeks prior to think about their design and what they wanted the game to do, and then they just went.
That's all.
Ours is, we'll save time.
Oh, good question. As Tim walks up.
So this is wonderful and really exciting. I just looked up the game design merit badge. Do you know anything of the history of the merit badge and how you decided to pursue? Did you design this method of going for the merit badge? Who is the merit badge counselor?
So the merit badge just came out last summer, and I worked with Dr. Brown in the teaching of primary sources through the Library of Congress. And so Eric has been creating ARIS games for a couple of years now. He's still going through school with his music teacher, and so that was kind of a natural fit. So then we just offered, I signed up to be the counselor.
And those of you who were here 2-3 years ago might remember Zach Powers. He was going for his Eagle Scout badge. He got it. All right, Tim.
All right.
Tim.
All right, hi everyone. My name's Tim. I'm a grad student in environmental studies here at UW-Madison, and I'll just spend a few minutes telling you about a game that's been in development for about a year called Sustainable U. We've been working on it over at the Mobile Learning Incubator right here at UW-Madison. Some of the major players in the game, it's funded by a grant from the Office of Sustainability, and it's been a collaborative effort between the Academic Technology Branch of IT and the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. Blank slide. Hi. Okay. Just a few motivations for why we designed this game in the first place. We wanted to use the UW-Madison campus, the physical campus, as a vehicle for showcasing sustainable features that have been kind of implemented in buildings on campus over the last few years. And we also wanted to educate the campus community about little things that they can do in their lives to reduce their environmental footprint. And this being an ARIS game, we wanted to go about that in a playful manner. So this little teaser will show you kind of the first iteration of that. Okay. So, a little background on the story. You are a student in the somewhat distant future, and as you can see, the future is quite bleak. And this guy here, who we refer to as Future Man, kind of recruits you to come back to the present, 2014, and learn about some sustainable features, technologies, behaviors that, if were implemented in that reality, could save the future from this catastrophe. And among other things, we've created this algae bloom that has become sentient and alive and is terrorizing the campus community. So the main message behind the game is just that actions that you take now, individually or collectively as a community, do matter and do have an impact for the future of not only this environment but the global environment as well. Just a few constraints on the game. We want it to be entirely campus-based. We wanted to utilize the campus as much as possible. People can start and continue anywhere on campus, and it's really meant to be played by anyone. The main audience is probably going to end up being prospective and incoming students and their families, but anyone can download and play this game once it's available. And really what we'd like for people to experience as they play the games, we want to change their perception of how they view things around them. We want them to see things in a different aspect and see things that normally might be hidden in plain sight that they wouldn't otherwise notice. And the highest level goal for the game, which would be awesome, would be by playing this game, we somehow affect some kind of positive behavioral change in the people that play the game. There are 2 levels of gameplay. The first is just a sustainability scavenger hunt that kind of takes place across the whole campus. And then within the context of that scavenger hunt, game players encounter these mini or even micro simulation games that might take anywhere from just quick hitters, a few like less than a minute to 3 minutes. And everything is kind of based on the 4 tenets of We Can Serve, which is an organization here at UW-Madison, and they attempt to reduce the campus's environmental footprint through initiatives in energy, waste, water, and transportation. So a bit about the scavenger hunt aspect. You can see the map screen there. That's part of the campus, and the little icons indicate where players can go to find locations and buildings on campus. Eventually what we'd like to do is overlay that with some artwork that projects the image of the future campus, and then as you complete tasks in the game, you can see how your actions affect that future reality, and you can see hopefully the campus clean up a little bit. As you arrive at each location, you are greeted with a video about what you're seeing, and it gives you a little bit of information about sustainable aspects of each building, and then eventually it instructs you to, within each building, find a QR code that we've hidden. It highlights a sustainable feature, you scan it, and then you can utilize that in the gameplay. This is just an idea of how we took an image from present-day campus. This is Granger Hall, and we have an artist that rendered this bleak future world where it's just an environmental mess. Here's a few photos of students actually out on the scavenger hunt part of the game. We play-tested the pilot version of the game back in April with about 100 students, and from their mostly constructive criticism, we've used that to iterate on the next development phase of the game. Tweak a few things. We've really enhanced the narrative of the game, the storyline, and so the mini games. The first version of these things were very complex. They were very kind of systems oriented, and this image kind of gives you an idea of a water game that we had designed, where it incorporates the built environment, the landscape, the infrastructure beneath the landscape, and then even the aquifer all the way to below. And really, it was just it was really complicated games, and we decided that after the first playtest, we threw out this idea and decided these mini games are going to be much more simple. They're going to be much more easy to make. They're still going to be substantive, and they will be fun to play, ideally. This is one game that we did finish mostly, and we play-tested back in April. It's just a basic garbage sorter game, and you get points based on sorting trash into the right bins. And the game ramps up in difficulty with the number of bins that you can sort trash into, and the speed at which the conveyor belt brings down the garbage. this this is just an image that I like. This is a John Martin rendition of Future Man, and I like. I can't tell if he's giving a thumbs up, like you've won the game, or if he's flipping you off, like you messed up or something. But this final slide is just an idea of some of the new, quicker, easier mini games that we're going after. The image on the top left is just a basic kind of a whack-a-mole. Turn off the incandescent lights in different buildings. The one on the top right is this pachinko style. It's raining, and you need to move the rain barrels to collect as much rainwater as possible. The one on the bottom left is a game that would involve an accelerometer where you have water, and by tilting the device, you want the water to go into the appropriate place. You don't want it to funnel into the lake and feed the lake monster. You want it to go to the porous pavement where it can soak through into the ground and down into the aquifer below. And then the one on the bottom right is just kind of it's an example of kind of the playful element that we've been going after. We're not going to use this, but this was like you use different types of power plants to charge up a laser that you're then going to fire at the lake monster as he's coming out of the lake and encroaching onto the campus. We're kind of, since April, we've been going over multiple rounds of iterations. We really just break off into groups, spitball things, see what sticks. Iterate on that and see if we can make these mini games, a number of them that will be tied into moments throughout the narrative that are pivotal moments. And we're just going to keep working on this thing throughout the summer. And the goal is that it'll be able to be unleashed onto the campus community in time for the fall semester. So, thank you.
All right, getting Janet. You guys have sat through 230 slides already. How you feeling? Oh, wait. Let's put you guys last because your embedded video PowerPoint is going to be in a PowerPoint, so we'll just have David come up. All right. Sorry, that was a last-minute switch this morning. All right, David Lynch.
Great, thank you. If I didn't feel like an ARIS newbie before, I did now. These are amazing presentations. I also wanted to thank David again. If you haven't read his master's thesis, it's actually a remarkable document that really tells the story of ARIS in an interesting way. So my project is Victopia, Campus of the Future. I work at the University of Victoria, which looks very utopic, I'll say. And I stumbled on ARIS. I was teaching a course. It's TS400, Technologies of the Future. And I wanted to get students thinking about geolocation, mobile technologies, but also kind of projecting their imagination at least 20 years into the future and thinking about how technology will reshape our society and how to react to it. This was it's a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary course. I get students from all different faculties, all different levels of interest, and I had different technology in mind when I bumped into Bernadette. She showed me her ARIS game. I thought, wow, this is robust. It works on iOS. I'm going to use it. And I thought I'd teach myself it first and then teach my students. I didn't get around to that, but that's another question. But the whole purpose was to get them to use ARIS to create a research-based augmented reality game or guide, they decided, that would reveal the campus of the future reshaped by technological trends. So they all had to kind of pitch ideas, themes, lenses through which to see the campus of the future. They voted on them, and we narrowed it down into 4 different ones. And the most popular by far was the post-apocalyptic campus. Everybody wanted to be involved in that. There was also a techno-utopian one as well that was very interesting. Another one that looked at self-tracking for creating sort of healthier lifestyles, and another one that looked at educational technologies. And the post-apocalyptic one actually had a number of computer science students who said, we want to design a game from the ground up. That's why we took this course. So I let them do that. So they went off on their own track. The other 3 groups used ARIS to different levels of success. And I just want to talk very briefly about that. And by far the most successful one was Victopia. And in this one, it imagined our kind of our ring-roaded university campus after the big earthquake that would keep hearing is coming, separates the campus from the island, and it goes floating off into the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And the future administrators create a dome around it and turn our public institution into a private elite college in which students arrive by boat or assigned a self-tracking device, are given instructions by some robotic voice in a tower, and have to kind of negotiate their first day on campus. And here's just a quick kind of screenshot. They have to go get their productivity pills, which reduces their libido so they can focus more on their school studies. And slowly, in this kind of wonderfully subtle narrative, it reveals that these kind of surveillance technologies used by the university to promote productivity have a darker element. And finally, the student has to kind of get to the escape boat and escape this campus. So it had a wonderfully kind of rich narrative to it. The other one that worked fairly well was called Healthy Body, Healthy Mind. And these students were inspired by the Zombies Run app. So they imagined a future in which a kind of a docile student body needs to kind of get fit again to kind of fight off some unnamed menace. So they actually kind of turned the campus using ARIS into almost an outdoor gymnasium. So you do a series of quests and you go to certain locations, and it gets you to kind of run around or use the steps to do various levels of gymnastics. The third one, however, was a bit of a complete disaster, and I don't have any of the slides for it because most of them have kind of spelling mistakes, and it was obviously not fact-checked, and that was the educational technology one. So a few quick lessons. One, the campus itself was a really good focus to kind of focus in a clear geographical area. An ARIS mentor was essential. I had Bernadette help my students out, and those that went to her learned a lot. Letting the groups self-select. I kind of forced them into groups after they voted, and I think having them do a little bit of speed dating ahead of time and deciding the size and the nature of their group would be better. More structure to the class. I designed it as a self-organized learning environment in which they chose the themes. I'd give it a bit more structure and more focus in the assignment, and more paper planning and wireframing and using the whiteboards at an earlier stage. I think it would have helped their design. The other thing, story didn't come easily for them. I'm in a writing department where we teach narrative, and most of our students are natural storytellers. In a group, they struggled with that. And embedding their actual research into ARIS posed obstacles for some of the groups as well. And I'd love kind of feedback on how to make that work better. And again, just more lab time for that kind of level of iteration and fine tuning would have helped. Some of the projects will, some of the other projects did do that. Thank you, that's it.
These are a good set of lessons up here, and especially with the storytelling. It's very hard to do on the mobile devices, as you probably, if you've been playing with it already, know. So now we have to switch over to PowerPoint. And it should be ready to go. But it's very dark. Here's that.
Yeah, actually, I want to use this as an opportunity for like 2 minutes, actually. Chris just had a really good point. In case you haven't met them, there's all the ARIS developers that really would like you to meet. You get that part of it. So, Kevin and Phil, Justin, so these guys specifically, Justin, Kevin, and Phil, you guys stand up. Thank you. At the center of things, Phil has been with this project for 3 years now. Phil basically built the existing editor. He's basically rewritten the client.
I don't know, but I've got it back on mine as well.
Server at this point.
Yep.
And Kevin and Justin have come on really heavy. And then another person I'd like to meet real quick if you haven't already met is my colleague who's just joined our team, and he is at the center of the field research platform. So, really worth talking to as well. And then one other person that you should meet is Caroline Hartman, who's in the back, who's going to be leading the ARIS team. She built the first iteration of SIP and got that off the ground. So another person who's just been a really great part of our team, who you probably haven't met. So it seems like that's just something we should pay attention to.
And I think we're back up. So, Janet was scan.
Brown, and this is Janet Ostoff. I am a professor at Governor State University, but I was a K-12 educator for years, taught Logo, loved it, and progressed on to Library of Congress. I'm not a history person, science, but I've been in this job for 10 years. I took it because I wanted to teach again, but now I'm director, and I have some wonderful trainers that work with me, including Susan Lynch and Janet. Governor State is about 40 miles south of Chicago. It is the least expensive Illinois State University to attend. And this year, for the first year, because they were created in '69, we're going to have freshmen. We never had freshmen before. And they're building an apartment facility, of which I'm going to live at. And I'm excited because I'm going to extend ARIS like you wouldn't believe, I hope. Not alone. Not alone. So it's just a great experience and everything. Teaching with Primary Sources program is statewide. When I began, it was 7 states. Now there's 27 states and 47 associated research grants involved with the Library of Congress, teaching with primary sources, which is just gigantic and tremendous. So primary sources are our goal of teaching. We teach a lot of teachers, and we also teach professors at our university as well, and we have another professor who trains with us. But TPS is all over now, okay? Teaching with primary sources. The one thing that we do, we offer a lot of different courses within our service, but one of them that we do is historical thinking using ARIS on mobile devices. Mobile devices are not foreign to me. I just finished my PhD a few years ago, and I did cell phone learning for 9th grade reading students, so it is a passion within me. We went and presented, Susan and I presented at the Library of Congress in 2010, just after we had spent a little bit of time up here in University of Wisconsin with the wonderful team, and we presented ARIS. They weren't ready. So we had to move on, but I convinced them I still wanted to spend some money with ARIS, and they let it happen. And I'm going to turn this over to Janet.
I'm Janet Ostoff, and I'm an 8th grade teacher at Mantino Middle School with Susan Lynch, and I also teach with Laura Lubin, who has been involved with ARIS, who's not here today. What we have done in our classroom since we came up here and trained with David and the team is to bring ARIS into the classroom, and this is something really new for our district that pretty much lives in the middle of a cornfield. So as you can see on the slide here, we use ARIS and we use teachers as facilitators. So as we're walking around the classroom, we can engage students in those higher order thinking questions as they're playing the game. We also use students as facilitators because we want them to collaborate and learn from each other. We also use a flat classroom approach, so we had our 8th graders go work with the 4th graders, and it's just an awesome experience for both the 8th graders and 4th graders because, you know, they have a sense of belonging and a sense of, you know, learning from the bigger kids, and then the little kids are actually teaching the older kids, so it was a great collaboration. So Susan and I, we create games to start, but then we decided that, why not let the students create the games? So at this point, we've been doing some professional development with other teachers. So now we said, okay, let's give the students a manual and see what they can do. Well, they did it even better than some of the teachers that we had trained prior. So with them designing the games, we applied to go to ISTE last year in San Antonio, and the students were accepted, and we had a student showcase. So we had 3 students from Manteno Middle School, and then Eric from Hickory Creek went as well. So the booth was a success. We had so many teachers come up and ask questions, and our students just did an awesome job talking about ARIS and how they create their games and things like that. This student here, her name is Leah Selk.
Don't have sound.
Sorry.
You have an editor, and then everyone in the class can log in, and then you can then go in, because now I have a track that I'll put my first name in. Then you can go in, the teacher can then go in and see, like, okay, was that really yes, true or not? And so they can check and see if it's right or not. This time is just more actually where you actually design them. Yeah, so you would.
So last year was a success, so this year we put in for another proposal, and we were accepted, and we will be in Atlanta at the end of the month with 8 students this year. I'm super excited.
Yeah. International Society of Technology and Education has been a long time thing that conference that I've been involved with, in and out. But they have anywhere from 13,000 to 18,000 people there. What was really cool about the students, and they have, these are called student showcases, and they have about 30 going on at the same time. It followed the main keynote, Jane McGonigal, who talked all about gaming, and it was like they flocked to this booth because hardly any of the others had anything about gaming. So it really, and it thrilled me to see this young middle school woman explain it. So, it was really worth it and everything. It was a great experience. And I have to thank the teachers, though, because I could never get them there through my grant. They had to do fundraising, they had to convince parents, and they certainly did, and they're going back again. One of the other things that we have done, our university and even our computer science department it's not quite that advanced with certain thinking. And many times we have to convince people. So Dr. Mary Lanigan works in human presentation skills, and she became one of our trainers. And she does this. I use it like for a little way to... Thank you.
Welcome, I am Dr. Lanigan, an Associate Professor in Human Performance and Training. Raise your hand if you have played a game at any time in your life. Come on, don't be shy, raise your hand. Most people play games from childhood well into adulthood. Studies show that playing games helps students retain more information in comparison to those who listen to lectures or work independently. As an instructor, I have used board games, computer games, stand-up games to teach my students various lessons. But my latest project focuses on creating a game using an iPad app and the Library of Congress resources. Let me give you some background information before explaining my game. I am a member of Teaching with Primary Sources, TPS, here at GSU. TPS is headed by Dr. Lucy Brown from the College of Education. TPS trains teachers about the vast resources found on the Library of Congress website. They recently taught TPS facilitators how to use the Library of Congress resources to create educational games using ARIS. ARIS is an open source platform for creating mobile games, tours, and interactive stories that are embedded into a map of the world. Anyone can use ARIS and the Library of Congress, both professors and students. I use both these sites to create my project, and I will now show you examples from my game. My game was designed for high school or community college students interested in fashion design. The game moves students through a timeline and historical map to view famous fashionistas, starting with Christopher Columbus landing in America at San Salvador. It also includes Martha Washington, Eleanor Roosevelt, Jackie Kennedy, as well as not-so-famous people dressed in unique clothing of the day, such as the lady dressed in pantaloons from 1911. While students are learning history and geography, the main goal of the game is for students to be inspired by past fashion techniques so they can incorporate these methods into new contemporary designs that they will create at the end of the game. As the student moves through the game, they pick up items. These items are stored within their iPads. At the end of the game, they can review the items they selected and use these images to inspire their own creations. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my project. Perhaps it encouraged you to create your own game. For more information about ARIS, go to this URL. For the Library of Congress, for TPS, or if you're interested in becoming an instructional designer, then visit www.govst.edu/HPT.
Go back to the PowerPoint. Ooh.
We should be back up. There we go.
There we go. Okay, thank you. I just have a little bit more, but we use that for a little advertisement so that it really works a little bit, and plus it gives them a good overview in helping with that. So, Mary, thank you. The other thing right now that we did do another presentation at the Library of Congress this year. We were invited to do a 5-minute, which, you know, and I know I'm over 5 now, but it won't take me that much longer. And the thing is that what the whole topic of the directors meeting, we meet, you know, twice a year, most of the time in Washington, D.C., was questioning. And what a perfect thing. And I emailed David and I said, please help. Send me your format for this. So I shared that with him and everything. And then I had gone.
Are you asking a question about
let's just hear this.
What are you curious about? Or what do you want to tell us? Let's say I'm going to play your game, which eventually I will. What do you think that I should be looking for? Can you give me a hint before I start it this time? Are you that far in developing it yet? Okay, well then I'll come back. Okay, no problem.
So that actually I did without knowing about the questioning. And I really wish if I had known about the questioning, I would have made sure we did a better job of that. Basically, though, we do a lot of different things with our students and players and try to get at the heart of the matter. And we follow an inquiry-based method of stripling model that is required by Library of Congress work and everything that we've worked very hard on as being part of that. And this year, when we go to ISTE, we have more students who've had team development along the way. And one of the projects that they did is effects of 9/11. I think they did a really great job. I think we are working, some of our challenges are really getting the questioning better, getting at the historical thinking, getting at really problem-solving approaches. And I think that we keep working that as we go along with that. Now, in connection with future plans, besides going to ISTE and taking the kids there, and we also are presenting 4 times there. I'm so excited because ARIS was accepted for a regular presentation this time. So it's progress. It just makes me realize that if you go ahead and people aren't ready, you can't work.
As a plug, we had 96 seats available, and all 96 are.
They're all taken for this session already, so that's a good thing. We promised a lot: computational thinking, CCS standards, but it's working. Susan did this one. She submitted this one, so we have to give credit to everybody with it. But future designs, because the freshmen are coming, our focus is one of the faculty in-service people who's going to live there. There's 3. Our choices were civic engagement. I heard that word this morning early, civic engagement. Sustenance, which I am going to avidly use and communicate with. And the third one is global learning and integrating it. So the focus is that we all have a feature to develop some of these things for our freshmen and our campus. So it's first we're going to do just a tour. They just picked a mascot. We never had any sports teams there. Somehow they're populating. So we'll do the tour of Jaguar Nation. And then we also have an international art trail. And it remains a trail. They're not going to cement everything to get it. But it's internationally known. So we're also going to do a tour of that with some investigation. One of the other things that we also have at the university right now, civil rights anniversary of the civil rights law and everything, and they're having a big splash in October and November. And so we're going to set up gallery walks. We have like over 300 primary sources involved with that. But the first one we're going to do is Timeless 42, not because of the color, but because of who he was and the excellence that he had. So thank you very much.
So that's what we have for you today for this part. It's been about 300 slides. You guys held up pretty well. The idea behind this is we know that you haven't had enough time to ask questions, but look around. We will have it this afternoon, and here's people. Drag them and go get them this afternoon. Help each other answer each other's questions. David, thank you.
That was amazing. You're all really amazing. And then get started. There's one really quick logistical thing I'm hoping John or someone can handle. Maybe John. Can you get the third segment on one of those back there? So we have all the breakouts mentioned. What we're going to do in the lunch hour is have everybody go up to these boards in the back that have like the different breakouts, and just put a little check mark by the thing that you imagine you're going to go to. That will give us about 45 minutes of scrambling in something in case like everybody's going to go to one session. So it gives us just a window of planning. It also just allows us to do another thing, which we always have liked to do, is take suggestions if you want to get another topic out. So right before we break for lunch, everybody will kind of go back there and write. But while we're getting ready for that, could people who are doing the 1:30 to 2:30, the facilitators, could you please do a quick talk, like 5 sentences about what you're going to be doing in ARIS 101, editor design, making good games that people want to play, and advanced conversations. So, ARIS 101.
Obviously, ARIS 101. So we've been inspired by all these games we've seen. And we have been inspired. If you haven't yet built your own game, this is going to be a workshop to take from creating an account all the way down to functional game. It's going to be in the second block. You have lots of lab time. We will need to bring a laptop, but we have iPads for everyone, so you have an opportunity to play the games and create your own workshop.
And it's really useful. Yeah, you can definitely double up.
We know.
Some of you use my laptop. The other thing is you don't have to stay that said, everybody got their shirt. You know what would be really cool? We gave out enough of those that we could make the main GLS look light gray if you all wore them tomorrow. So I'm not saying you own any, or you owe me anything. I'm saying that'd be kind of cool. Okay, I'll leave it there. Cool, well, let's get into the editor. And I'm really not going to spend a lot of time with this, but a lot of people haven't seen this. It's really been a process that we haven't been trying to hide this process. It just is a lot of work to communicate about it, and it's kind of been going really quickly. So this is one of the times you come up to a summit. These are one of the fringe benefits of coming to the summit, is you kind of get on the inside of what's happening and you get a chance to shape it. So yeah, let's talk about this for a second. First off, again, thank you for the partners that have directly given towards us getting a new editor. Specifically, the New Learning Institute and the Teaching with Primary Sources group have said, we don't have a specific game. We're going to give you money just to make this so other people can do it. And that is a whole different kind of giving that is really fantastic. So again, thank you to those sponsors. Really so we've got some major goals for this release, and they're not small. The most primary one is we want to be completely in HTML5. No more Flash, and that's why we had to do a complete rewrite. This does a lot of things for us. One of them, and that's really exciting, is that we should be able to get it to work on this. And I'll give you a little sneak peek. It does, and that's exciting. This means editing in the field on any device. The other thing is it's a standards-based thing, so it should be around for a really nice long time. So if we keep things in HTML, we're kind of lining up with the way modern web standards work. And if we looked at a usability kind of analysis of our current editor, some of the biggest problems, most of the biggest problems are just because it's in Flash and it's coming from a paradigm of 6 years ago. Just the way web browsers move and think, the way the back button works and all that stuff just works better if we make it work completely in HTML. Another one is we are radically international at this point. The client is already localized in Spanish, German, and French, with Japanese and Finnish on the way. And people volunteered to localize. We want to localize the editor all the way through, so that anyone we can get to volunteer to fill out our little form will have ARIS available in that language as well. We know right out of the gate that we have people in French, Spanish, and Finnish, and we'll see if we can wrangle up people to convert into other languages. Japanese has already been one that someone who's kind of like informally volunteered to see if we can pin it down, get them to do it. It actually only takes maybe an hour or so of work from someone that's a native speaker to fill out our little file to internationalize. Another one, and this is a big deal, is let's start focusing on story instead of technology. The first editor out of the gate was so inspired by the idea of GPS. It was just, that's what we were working with. We were excited about the idea of an iPhone, the idea of GPS. We weren't really thinking about the kinds of experiences that we wanted people to have. This is different. From the ground up, we're thinking about the experiences that we want people to create. Unlike 5 years ago, if you would have grabbed anybody in the core design team, what would have excited us the most is that we had no idea what people would do with it. And that was like the fundamental thing. To tell you the truth, now I know. And now I know the stuff that's good. And what we want to do is produce more of the good stuff. There's also a lot of stuff that's really not good. And the way the editor thinks right now, it kind of makes it really easy to make not good stuff. So we really want to get at the center of that and help people tell compelling, amazing interactive stories. And that's really related to this idea. We want to make ARIS a tool to think with. Now, what I mean by that is up until now, if you look at the way our process works when we're designing a game, we use Google Docs, we whiteboard, we have all these external structures, and then we enter the data into ARIS. We want to get rid of that idea of this kind of like inside-outside. We want the tool to help the designer think. We want the tool to help you visualize what's going to happen. We want the tool to actually expand your idea of what a mobile, locative, interactive story or game can be. And the tool should be the place that's comfortable to do that. So those are pretty big, high-level goals, but that's really where we're at. And they come from just having years and years and about 10,000 prototypes of things that have worked and haven't worked. And we get to base that we get to base our new design on something like 10,000 iterations of games that have been made. And these are really the things I think are important. So let me lead you through the process a little bit, and then I'll actually show you some live demo stuff. This is where we started last year, and one of the big things we knew is we wanted to create some sort of way to visualize the experience over time. And I really thought quests were going to be the way to do that. And you'll see that we've kind of revamped on that. But something that allows you to say, the experience that players are having isn't just place, but it's also sequence. It's time. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we want the tool to help you think about that. The tool right now does not help you think about that. The tool has a bunch of points on a map. And it doesn't show any of the structure of the activity that's happening inside of that. So this was one of the earlier, this is a year ago, these sketches. The other thing we knew is we wanted conversations to have a bit of a map. We wanted to be able to see the flow through dialogue. And this was the early sketch we had of that. And another one that we knew was a major problem area was we wanted people to be able to think about requirements in a more visual way. It's a classic computer science problem or a computer literacy problem to think about these things called Booleans, which are ways that computers make decisions. And Scratch has made some neat headway into how to visualize that. But to tell the truth, we want to go a little further. We wanted something a little tuned in for exactly the kind of stuff we had. So this was our first crack at that. It's very Scratch-like. And I think we iterated on it. I think we've got something really great. Okay, so here is one of the first mock-ups that's getting built. And there's a couple of big ideas here, and I apologize for people in the back if this is really small. I hope I can pull out some principles here. Major paradigm in ARIS, brand new paradigm, and it really kind of hit me over the head once we had it, and that was the notion of a scene. The idea of a scene is it is a subset of time that has certain ARIS objects associated with it that are available only when the person is in the scene. At the most basic level, you could imagine creating a simple narrative game that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it could actually have scene, beginning, scene, middle, scene, end, objects in them, and then a criteria from when the player moves from one scene to the next. And what that means is you could build an ARIS game or ARIS narrative with no requirements. You just visually drag and drop this stuff out, and you can create sequences of events, which surprisingly is one of the things that always blows people away when they figure out how to use requirements to create sequences. So scenes are going to get that fundamental thing, and it's not really that crazy of an idea, but really what it means is that there's this extra little variable we track, which is what scene are you in right now? Scenes are probably the biggest, single most kind of like large deviation we've got, because we're expecting scenes, and the screen looks like this to be our new home screen. We expect maps to be another one, kind of like, it's not quite in parallel, but scenes being the main place that people are landing and doing most of their work. So as you can see right here, a scene is one of these boxes. A scene has objects inside of it, including quests. And then those objects can point to each other. And we can start visualizing the flow between the objects and the scenes with arrows. We're calling those things triggers. So we're introducing the idea that a certain action within the game will trigger something to happen on the screen. And the way that you work in the scene right now is when you click on a certain thing, like the marchers or the chancellor, or a scene itself, this right area is where we set up the triggers for what makes this happen. Triggers are pretty simple. There's 3 of them. It can happen by going to a location, both virtually or physically. It can happen by scanning the code, or later some augmented reality stuff. Or it can happen as a sequence of events, so that one thing, like completing a plaque or completing a conversation, naturally leads right into the next thing. So there's really just 3 ways to trigger something happening on screen. So gone are the days where if you're using QR codes, you create a location on a map that's not related to anything, and you set its error to 0. That's weird. It worked. Everybody did okay with QR codes, setting all those errors to 0 and creating these really weird maps that look like scenes, but now we're just going to build scenes. So that's one of the major things. Right in this, what we can also see is an upgraded object bar. So the idea for the object bar, it's similar to what we've got right now in some ways, where it's a place to get access to all your stuff. But we really wanted to sort it by a couple main categories. So now we can filter or organize based on what scene something is getting used in, or what type of thing it is, and there's also some searching functionality that's in it. And that object bar will take on a couple different tweaks depending on where else you see it. But it's held constant through most of it. And you can also see this other thing on the right, which is the things that are related as options to scenes, like triggers are over there, but nothing deeper than that. We really wanted to do another thing that we came across here, and that is understand that people are working in teams, and/or are in different kind of minds of view, like at a time. They're in different design settings. So when you sit down and work on scenes, you're thinking about sequencing and you're thinking about logic. I don't want to have the dialogue details right in your face or the media details right in your face. We really want to kind of push that stuff aside and make it really easy for you to concentrate on the thing that you're doing right now, which is thinking about logic and flow. If you actually want to edit one of these objects, like dialogue, we can get at it by clicking edit dialogue over here or going over here, but it's kind of a different place. And what that's going to set up for us is that the people that are managing media can hang out in the media tab. The people that are thinking about locations, your location scout, can hang out in the locations area. The people that are writing scripts can hang out in the script area. The people that are thinking about logic can do that. And we can actually have whole teams that are in different parts of the tool at once and facilitating the natural kind of roles and collaboration that we see happen. And I'm really excited to see how that's going to play out in practice with teams of kids. And high-paid designers as well. So I kind of am hinting at this top nav bar, but let me hop into another thing. This is how we're imagining requirements will function. We're our Boolean editor. We've come up with a really simple metaphor, I think, for this. Right now, we've got that table, and sometimes fields are used and not used. You know, you pick an option, and there's a lot of like not applicable kind of things and buttons that appear. So we really wanted to get something so that every requirement, every way that you can ask ARIS a question, has the player done this, or is the player ready for this other thing? It would all have its own little custom form. So each little requirement looks like one of these boxes on the left with all the possible settings you'd have around it. So if you're setting up a note and you want people to capture it, you know, there's a little mini map right there and you can kind of set it up. Or if you just want people to have seen a plaque or seen or have a certain amount of item, that would be one little thing here. The lines represent and circles represent something really simple. They represent the equivalent of an and. So what happens here is if we ever see two things linking to one circle, that means for that circle to be true, both of the things before it have to be true. The other part of that is if we want an OR relationship, we add more circles. So if any of the circles are true, then the whole thing is true. And what that boils down to then for us is just two plus buttons. We can have a plus button here to add more things to this AND chunk, or we can have a plus button over here that adds more OR chunks. And we're thinking that the simple visual is not only going to allow like young people and new editors to kind of come into this world a lot more visually, but it also does something that we've been waiting forever, and that is we can express any Boolean expression now in this. Owen, this one's for you, no more quests, that you use as a trigger for part of a requirement when you need to do parentheses. So we finally got rid of that and kind of rebuilt the API from the ground up, where we can do any sort of Boolean expression because of a little computer science proof that means that any Boolean expression can be reduced to a set of ands separated by ORs. So we can represent anything in that regard. No more De Morgan's law. No more De Morgan's law. Ugh, man, some long conversations around finding those bugs. So we're really excited about the way that this is looking. The individual object editors are just little popovers, and they're simple. Not too big of a change from where we're at. If there's one change that's worth mentioning, it's that we really want to put a simple HTML-rich text editor in here, because everywhere in ARIS supports HTML. So let's make it easier for folks. Conversation authoring. We really took some cues here from the way that professional tools in kind of the dialogue world work, and just kind of borrowed from them. Figured why would we invent the wheel? We just adopted the way a number of these tools function. And there's a couple things that are worth noting here. The idea of a character, as it currently exists, put that out of your mind for a second. Instead, what we have is a dialogue object. A lot of the conversations that happen in ARIS, as soon as you learn how to use the fancy stuff that Phil will show you, they're not just one-on-one conversations. It's not like player talks to character, talks to player, talks to character. Every once in a while, the starters come in, or this other character comes in. And really what we're talking about is a dialogue interaction. Different people are coming in and out. So we're getting rid of the idea of a character in the way you thought of it up until now. Now we have a dialogue interaction. Now, inside of the dialogue interaction, we happen to have a cast. Now, if we look at what the cast is, it's really pretty simple. It's a title, and it's a piece of media associated with a particular interaction. So we would create things like the newspaper editor, or the protester, or the angry protester. So we'd have different moods that would be represented as different members of the cast. So then what we're getting at is no XML. We're going to get rid of all that stuff. And instead, your conversations are going to be authored by adding chunks to this structure, picking what character is saying it or doing it, setting options like the camera zoom and stuff like that that you can do right now that no one does, and fundamentally getting rid of the hub and spoke method that we have so long defended and I finally decided isn't that great. So the data structure around ARIS right now in conversations is that you have conversations, and they'll have requirements on them. And every time the player does anything, it looks at the big list of possible conversations, it calculates which ones are available, and gives those as options. And you see one of them, and then it does the calculation and gives you the options. So that's always been called like the hub and spoke model. Well, it's kind of a pain in the butt to write that. If you've done any sort of serious dialogue, you realize it's kind of complicated. So what we've done is added more of a branching model that if you want to mimic the hub and spoke model, you can, because it just has this simple little thing. Everything is always flowing down and out whenever there's choices. Your conversations are always going to look like a tree upside down. But at any point, we can link back to any other place in it. So if you wanted to create a pure hub and spoke, everything could just, like what we have now, every little part that comes off will just link back to the middle. Now that's the only way you can do it right now. That'd be one of the ways you can do it in this. Visualizing conversations should be a lot easier when we're seeing them as a flow through this with different choices and options. It really comes down to just adding a plus button at the right spot. So at every one of these little nodes, we can hit a plus button, and then 2 things pop out of it. And hit a plus button, and 3 things pop out, and the whole thing just keeps on centering and generating. And I'm just crazy excited to see how much better our dialogue is going to be when people do this and think about it this way. HTML editing, pick the character. Yeah, that's kind of what it looks like right now. One other, I guess I've got 2 more, and then I'll show you the real thing. Locations. We do have locations. We do have a map, but the role of the map really should be to visualize the relationship between places and objects. One of the things that's so funny right now is that we have an error range that's a number instead of a visual. And I think just this idea alone is going to make a huge difference. So when we're looking in the map, we can see the regions in which those objects are active, in which they're in range, and how those regions overlap. We also have this idea of how to organize your locations. We've really been thinking about the location scout kind of role in film production. So we're really giving you a couple ways to organize things. You can look at just all your objects, or you can look at by the location or the type of thing, like plaque, item, character. And then also a way to edit the custom maps right in this screen so we can see them overlaid as you're designing with them. So if you want to upload custom maps that replace the Google Maps, we have that feature in here right now, but our editor has been so hard to use that we actually pulled it back out. So now is a great time to add it in a well-designed way. And then last little thing here is the idea of a media manager. So there's actually a screen in here that's all about media. It's helping you get your aspect ratios right. We really want to build in a built-in cropping tool so that you have everything locked in. We really want to sort media by not only where it's used, but also just the kind of media it is. So if it's cropped to fit a plaque, or if it's cropped to fit an item, that's another way that we can continue to reuse and kind of polish the stuff in there. Okay, so let me show you where we're at.
At some point, can you tell us what happens legacy-wise?
Yeah, I will talk about it in just a second. Okay, so right off the bat, it is probably exciting for anybody that's done this for a while to see this. Finally, ARIS on an iPad. So when you're out in the field, and I know this is really small, and your locations aren't triggering, you just change them. This would have made my life a lot easier. So, okay, that works. Yeah. It'll be really small on phone. It is small on phone. That's an iPad mini, and it looks pretty good on that. So, right off the bat, here's language selection. So we just pick, we've got a couple little samples in here. And again, I should probably preface that this isn't ready for beta testing right now. I'll get to the schedule a little bit, but just kind of showing you some of the features we do have built out. Game selection, little things like your account, log out. This is how you make new games. I'll go ahead and make a new one just so you can get an idea what this looks like. We start with kind of a scene layout, and we've got the ability to add new scenes. So let me create an intro scene. And then within our intro scene, now we've got one of these things. By clicking on it or any other object, that's when we get the settings for it. We've got the beginning of our panel over here. We can create within that scene then all of our objects. So objects are usually created within scenes themselves. So we'll create a dialogue. When we create a dialogue, it'll ask us whether or not we want to reuse one or create a brand new one. So in this case, I don't have any old ones in there. So we'll just do a new one, and we'll call this welcome. Now I can go to the locks and triggers configuration of this thing. So we've got our little mini editor on the side to think about how it's sequenced and when it comes up. We would edit dialogue, the actual dialogue editor, by clicking in here. Otherwise, we pick location, QR code that you're going to use for it, or whether or not this thing is triggered immediately when certain locks are fulfilled. So with location, we've got a mini editor. We can pick its zone and its location. So that's just for this one thing. We can pick its map title. And then any other options that we'd have about it are right here. The idea of requirements, we're starting to call locks. And those locks will give you a little preview of what objects are involved, and then right above the button where you edit them. So we can get kind of a preview. It's related to keys and certain people that are what unlocks this thing. And we would continue on in this way, adding our different scenes. So you could think of games especially that have kind of beginning, middle, end. You would end up creating kind of those main moments in the game, and then dragging them out, creating objects within them, and sequencing those together so we can visualize the storyboard flow through this. So this whole interaction is exactly what we do when we're teaching it on a great big whiteboard. And we give out Post-it notes, and we have people draw this kind of flow, and we're trying to make the tool look like the stuff that they draw when you leave them to themselves. Let me hop in. I'll just show you quickly the map. Oh, I've only got one thing in here right now. But yeah, it's this idea again that we can visualize the relationships between things on the map. So just for kicks, I want to make one more thing here. And call this more. Okay. So this kind of setup where we can finally see the relationship between our things on the map and where they overlap and where they don't overlap. This kind of activity, if you haven't already done it, is actually really difficult in the current thing because you're always visualizing where those regions are. So let's just make it visual. It just seems like a no-brainer. I guess the other thing is just you can see how these different tabs are interrelating with each other. So like each tab has kind of a primary function to go into these different functions. But then when we're actually editing a thing, we do these popover views. So the thing editing is always happening as this large screen. So I'm actually going to pause the demo there and show you just a couple of our next steps, and then we'll cut out of here. That one. So, unbelievable work. Phil, Kevin, you guys are like kicking it out. Nights and weekends. hopefully you get a general feel, like, so we haven't done our graphic design layer on it. We've got a lot more objects to add. You get a kind of a look and feel of what it looks like across devices, just the way things move, and it's just so much more modern. So here's where I'll end, is just some status, where are we at, what are the next actions? Big deal here is that most of our work, like I said, is actually on the back end. Creating a data structure for conversations that works like that, creating a data structure for scenes. That's where we spend a lot of time. Also, in the fact that the way Kevin has been building the authoring tool is we're relying on some pretty high-level frameworks that allow us to add functionality and change functionality very rapidly, because we're building like this big, strong, awesome foundation instead of kind of scrapping it together. So we really are just laying all that groundwork, and we're really at a spot where we're starting to leverage it. So in the last couple of days, even, Kevin's been like adding new features pretty rapidly, mostly because he can leverage things that already exist. So we're really kind of hitting velocity, which is very exciting. We have a lot of these UI views that need to be built, things that I've shown mock-ups for, but just aren't in it yet. So we're really hoping that this is going to pay off, and the foundation we lay is going to be able to make all this happen really quickly. Our real plan is that we're going to need some really heavy beta testing, and we're really going to need you in August to just bang on this thing. We have a very strict September 1 deadline, which means on September 1, this thing goes live, the other one shuts off. And there's nothing we can do about it. And that's a little freaky. Usually you get to overlap for longer than that. So we want to have them overlap and run in parallel for as long as possible, but there is going to be this time where we have to just pull the trigger. Games made on the old offer will continue to function and won't have anything go wrong on September 1, but you won't be able to jump in and edit them easily. And this data structure is pretty different. So what we're actually planning on people doing is migrating their game from the old system into the new one. So games that people really want, they'll hit a button and they'll pull it into this new system. And it's going to be doing some pretty intense stuff. So like all the XML, we'll get rid of it and we'll convert it back into these real data structures, ones that are sensible and visual. So we're going to have kind of a big kind of move that's going to happen right around that time. It's really the only way that we can structure this activity to take place. So it's going to be an exciting summer for us as we wrap this up. And then V1, we'll see how things play out. It's really only the map that shuts off. So if we do have some sort of emergency situation, what we'll end up doing is trying just to swap out the map with a JavaScript map on our existing one. Right now, though, I just want to put all of our inertia into getting something that's awesome that everybody wants to use, instead of kind of draining our limited resources on keeping something afloat it's time to retire with it. So that's kind of where we're at. If you want to talk more about it after lunch, I'm here. So let's go get some lunch. Awesome work, everyone.